I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to this preview of Shrinking Trump.
Our show is devoted to looking at the psychological functioning of Donald Trump, who not only suffers from a severe personality disorder that we gather from observing his behaviors, but also lately incipient signs of cognitive decline or dementia. We focused on that because we believe that the popular culture and the press doesn't know how to think about that decline and tend to give him a pass. At the same time, the culture has been very worried about Joe Biden, whether he is too old, whether he is not up to the job. And my colleague John, about 6 months ago, began making the argument that Donald Trump has a brain that is dementing, but Joe Biden has a brain that is aging normally for an 81-year-old. 2 weeks ago, Joe Biden went on the debate stage and had a catastrophic performance by all accounts, by people who believe him and know him, and those who were just hoping that he would perform very well. It threw everyone in the country, in the punditry class, in the elites, and even among psychologists like John and me. We didn't know what to make of it because we had heard about Biden's high level of functioning from his staff, from international representatives who've talked about it. We saw the work that he did in gathering NATO for to protect Ukraine, as well as mobilizing forces for Israel. And we saw him push important legislation through Congress. So it threw us for a loop. So I have been urging everyone to calm down and let's gather more information. Because unfortunately, Biden had not been doing press conferences, had not been doing rallies, so it came as a kind of shock. So what I talk about in this episode of the show in more detail than I will in this preview is my sort of model for understanding what has happened and who Joe Biden is. I believe that Joe Biden has been working very hard as president. I believe that he sometimes gets very tired or worn out with his incredible schedule, as all presidents, I think except Donald Trump, have engaged in. And sometimes he gets exhausted, can't put sentences together, says his staff, listen, let's call it a day, let's work on it tomorrow. That's what we've been hearing about. Unfortunately, there's also this terror that what if he is suffering from Alzheimer's disease or advanced dementia, which I actually didn't see in the debate. I saw him fumbling and not being effective, but when I looked at the words that he said, they read much better than they sounded. And Trump's pathological lying and distortions were much worse than they sounded because he spoke with bravado and energy. So my thought is that since then, Biden has been having rallies where he says, when you get knocked down, you get up and you fight. And there's something so activated about it. It's as if Biden has shifted from being the president to being a campaigner. And as John has pointed out, this is a kind of story of Biden. It's a story he tells about himself, that when he gets knocked down, that's when he gets energized. And we've seen that for the past week. At the same time that we've seen Donald Trump, who right now, by the way, has experienced campaign managers, the first time that's ever happened for him, who have gotten him, for the most part, well, for a week and a half, to be quiet. So that's part of what we'll be talking about on the show today. And John, what's your take on things?
Yeah, we felt that I did start the show with the proposition that it's a tale of two brains, that Biden's brain is normally aging and Trump's brain is dementing. And so, as people who live on Earth One, where we do actually deal with facts, including inconvenient ones, after the debate, we had to include what might be new data affecting those two hypotheses. We have definitely proven that Donald Trump has dementia as well as malignant narcissism. We even had someone on our show who did a study to show the rate of demented speech in Donald Trump being very high and not in Joe Biden. But Joe Biden was higher in normal aging. I think what we saw in the debate was a perfect storm where there were like 5 different variables at work, but the total collection of them made a horrible impression. So he did have a cold. He is old. I do believe that they really prepared him in exactly the wrong way, filling his head full of facts and having an 81-year-old man cram for the test instead of being Joe Biden. Okay, and talking about his values, talking about the importance of a democratic America versus a Hitlerian dark America, being with a dictator on day one. He has started to fight back and make fun of Donald Trump and go on the counteroffensive and talk about his cognitive decline and his crazy statements about Hannibal Lecter and that we won the Revolutionary War by capturing the airports. He said in his 4th of July speech. So he's going on the offensive. He's energized, and what we have learned, but what is being overreacted to, is that no, this wasn't entirely a one-off in the sense that, as Harry says, yes, sometimes when he's tired, sometimes when he's overtaxed, he might stumble over his words or become momentarily inattentive or even have trouble finding a word. But what has happened has been a hysteria, okay, which is not actually fitting the facts. And actually, with all of these informants, right, that have come out of the woodwork, this is sort of like a Me Too moment, like all these people saying, yes, I also witnessed Biden behaving this way sometimes. Even if you listen to what all of the new informants have said, and we do have to respect the fact that they are informants, that they are giving us information, because we have been criticized for diagnosing Trump from afar. And one of the things we've said is we can observe his behavior, and we can see what informants who observe his behavior very closely say about him. Well, what these informants are saying about Biden is not that he's completely out of it. They're saying he has moments where he's taxed, where he's tired, where he is momentarily has trouble with his words. Well, one of the other reasons that Biden has trouble with his words, he has a lifetime stuttering disorder. This has been incredibly underweighted and under talked about. It's really been under the radar, and it's very, very important because people are now potentially, I believe, confusing stuttering with cognitive decline. And actually, in some ways, they might sound similar. If someone's stumbling over their words, is it because they can't understand or form a thought or a sentence, or is it because they can't articulate it? Well, folks, we always want to do a little teaser to have you come and watch our show, but this week I really mean it. I want you to hear our guest, Dr. Eric Jackson, a professor at NYU, whose area of expertise is stuttering, and especially variations in stuttering. What he explained to us is that because Biden is aging, his capacity to compensate for his stutter is decreasing. Because to compensate for a stutter requires an enormous amount of actual mental and verbal dexterity, because you're dancing around words and phrases you can't say, but trying to keep the flow of speech. And sometimes in trying to avoid a stutter, you make a random comment, or it feels like a random comment because you're just jumping into another thought. I had that idea when I was watching the debate that that's a lot of what we were seeing was a lot of stuttering that was being misunderstood as cognitive decline. Well, but I'm not a stuttering expert. So in this show, we interviewed Dr. Eric Jackson. He educated us about stuttering. He educated us about Biden. And I think America needs to be educated about the role of stuttering in the way in which we see Biden communicating.
So here are some excerpts from this really excellent interview.
We hear Biden stumbling over his words, and we think his brain isn't working right. He has cognitive decline. He has dementia. How can we When you're listening to Biden speaking, what are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on again. And I also want to say at the outset that I'm a person who stutters. So when you hear interruptions in my speech, if you hear things that sound like stalls, it's not because I don't know what I want to say. It's not because I'm forgetting. It's because I'm a person who stutters. And I just wanted to comment just really briefly on something that came up already in the show. And we do think of stuttering as having a neurobiological basis. There's a strong genetic component. There are subtle group level differences in brain structure and function. However, critically, stuttering is not associated with any cognitive impairment. And I think that's really, really important to understand here. And even if someone were to do an evaluation on a single stutter, a neurological evaluation on a single stutter, there's no way that they would be able to find any sort of abnormality in that one person's brain. So with Biden, it's very interesting. I think it's a complex interaction between a couple of different things. I think that he stutters, and I think stuttering is playing a bigger role than most people think. Certainly, than most people are talking about right now. And I think that there may be some aging effects going on that are interacting with his ability to manage stuttering and to respond to stuttering, right? And it's impossible to have this discussion without talking about the anticipation of stuttering, which is the stutterer's ability to know that they're about to stutter, right? So early in development, stutterers receive negative feedback related to their stuttering from people in their environment. This could be comments like, slow down, take a breath. It could be reactions or frustration by parents, even if unintended, things like sighing, or it can be outright mockery, right? But regardless of the intention, as kids, we internalize these reactions and start to think that there's something wrong with stuttering and something wrong with us, right? And by associating instances of stuttering with negative listener reactions, we develop this ability to anticipate stuttering. Now, the relevant point here is that with this ability, we develop a range of compensatory strategies that are often not helpful, by the way, because we don't want to experience negative listener reactions and we want to avoid them, right? So things like stalling to let a moment of stuttering pass, or switching words around to disguise core stuttering, abandoning things we want to say because it doesn't feel worth the effort in that particular moment, and even physical responses like eye blinking, which for some reason sometimes helps stutterers get through a moment of stuttering. Now, Biden uses a lot of these, right? And I think they are becoming more clear to people now. And I think what's happening is that when he was younger and quicker, he was more able to implement them. But now that he's aging and slower, it's more difficult for him. And that seems to be contributing to what people are characterizing as the mumbling or the stumbling or even the losing his train of thought. It's almost like there's like a cognitive overload where the stutterer has to think of what to say, but also how to say it, right? And in some ways, we could say that being a stutterer actually requires more cognitive ability in that they are thinking about those two different things, right? But with Biden, unfortunately, because he seems to be experiencing these normal effects of aging, he's just not as verbally agile anymore.
Well, I'm so glad that we had Dr. Jackson on to illuminate America. I just hope he does a tour all around the country to educate people with his message about stuttering and Biden.
And listen, we want you to come see our show. Come see our show. You can download it, view it anywhere you get your podcast. It's called Shrinking Trump, and we hope to see you soon.